Welcome everybody to Gracegate. We are so excited that you have joined us here today on Church Online.
We know that's a little bit difficult doing church from home, but we're still excited to hear from you and do this with you this morning.
Exactly. My name is Jordan.
And I am Eliana.
And we are basically going to start off the program today with you guys. And we're really excited because although we've been in lockdown, and although we're still in, level 3?
I think
it's phase 1. All right, it's a lot of confusion. There's some cool stuff that actually has been happening over just the past couple of weeks, actually. And so, Elle, do you want to share with us some of the things that's been going on?
So besides the fact that we can all get outside and join bubbles for the day and do a little picnic, at Gracegate, with Gracegate, we've actually been having our Radiate Camp online.
Come on.
So instead of, meeting up and tenting and being all childlike together, you're doing it from home, which has been really awesome. So it's been really cool to see those challenges up on the social media pages for the Radiate guys. So that's been really awesome. So this week and last week we started our new series, Deadly. So last week we looked at pride, and what are we looking at this week?
And this week we are looking at greed. And for the first time, not the first time, but a long time, Zolz is actually going to be taking the message, which is really, really exciting. And she's got something really, really awesome to share with us on greed. But speaking of all like the Deadly series and the 7 deadly sins and all sorts of stuff, we actually thought it would be fun to play a little game with you guys. So Eliana, why don't you explain to us what the game is?
Okay, so you get kind of like classic sayings around kind of the 7 deadly sins. It's not necessarily obvious that it's the 7 deadly sins, but like classic proverbs or sayings around these sort of things. One of them, which is not one of the examples and isn't one of the deadly sins, is the saying, vengeance is best served cold. Like that kind of premise.
Yep.
So what we're going to do is I'm going to say the saying, or the first half of it, and you guys have to try and guess it before Jordan does.
Easy. Well, easy for me because I'm a genius. No, I'm just joking. Anyway, let's continue. Let's play this game. Let's go.
Okay,
are you ready? So we want you to write it on the thing. You guys got to beat me to it, all right? Because I know you can, because you guys are actually much smarter than I am. So let's go. Here we go. I won't even look at the phone because I can see it quite clearly.
Okay, I'm turning. You can look at me now.
Oh, okay.
All right. First one is pride comes before the
eggs. No, I'm kidding. I actually do know this one. It is pride comes before the fall.
Nice.
Thank you.
Okay.
Did you beat me to it? I don't know. Probably
wasn't hard to.
Yeah, probably. Anyway, go on. What's the next one?
All right, this one is greedy.
Greedy?
Yeah, it's kind of like you would call someone this.
Greedy bum?
No, not a greedy bum.
What a greedy fellow.
No.
Greedy goose?
Have you ever talked to anyone ever?
Well, geese are greedy, man.
Geese are scary.
Yeah.
I hate geese.
And so they're greedy. I don't know, what is it?
It's greedy guts. You're a greedy guts.
I don't even know.
Did you not actually know that one?
No.
Wow.
Yeah, anyway, go on.
All right. Envy is the art of counting others' blessings instead of
your own.
Yeah. That one was quick. Good luck with that one. Anyway.
Go on.
Anger doesn't
solve anything?
Yeah.
Really?
Anger doesn't solve anything.
Oh my goodness. Is it actually?
It literally is.
Oh, wow. Wow. Okay. Sorry, I thought I was going to get that wrong.
No, you got it right.
Okay, cool. All right, how did you guys do? You guys got to tell us in the chat whether you got it before I did. So this morning, we are actually going to continue our program with some awesome worship and music that we have recorded here at Gracegate. And so it's very similar to last week. Some of our staff members have come in and we've followed the social distancing rules and all that sort of stuff. But we have recorded some worship and some music for us this morning. So we're going to go into that, and we really hope that you guys enjoy the program. Despite the frustratingness of kind of still being alert level 3, just the fact that we can still be together, even online, is such a blessing. So we hope that you enjoy the program, and we will see you afterwards.
I've heard 1,000 stories of what they think you're like, and I've heard the tender whisper of love in the dead of night, and you tell me that you're pleased and that I'm never alone. You're a good, good father. It's who you are, it's who you are, it's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am, it's who I am, it's who I am. I've seen many searching for answers far and wide, but I know we're all searching for answers. Only you've provided to know just what we need before we we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out our praise to you only. Yes, you are. Great are you, Lord.
Hello, my name is greed. I make you want all that you see. Those desires you have, they come from me.
There's two sides to every story, but I don't know how this one ends. You want fire and you want glory, but there's a struggle that lies within. There's a war in my head and I don't understand how we ended up here. There's a tear in my heart where your lies left a mark and now nothing is clear. Whose side are you on? Whose side are you on? What lines have been drawn? Whose side are you on? Whose side are you on?
So we are in week 9 of lockdown here in Auckland, and it's been a long time. And if we go right back to the beginning, one of the things that me and Wes did was that we started this thing called a lockdown list. So it's because, you know, you're stuck in lockdown and you realize I'm going to have a bit more free time in the evenings, and you're also going to have some more free time on your hands in the weekend because we can't really go and do much else. So we started this lockdown list, and it's the kind of stuff, you know, that you never really get around to. So it's things like washing the windows, doing the gardens, cleaning the gutter, all these mundane sort of tasks. And maybe you're one of those people and you had a lockdown list as well. And if it is you, why don't you jump on the chat and share with us some of the things that were on your list. But what we did was we put on ours the task of cleaning our garage. So our garage is one of these rooms in our house that just like accumulates stuff, right? Like it's just the place where you put all the random things in the house that you don't really know where they go, or you put all the things in the house that you can't be bothered putting in their right place. So this garage is just full of like office stuff, loads of books. It's got a pram, a bike, some storage containers, heaps of sports gear. It's just got so many things in there, even a single bed. Now, Wes is one of these guys that is like a real minimalist. So this room just totally stresses him out every time he sees the door open to it. So he put it on our list to clean, and one of the things that he did before we started cleaning this room was actually subtly got us watching Maria Kondo's minimalist sort of cleaning documentaries on Netflix, right? So I think maybe this was his subtle way of getting me, who's not really as bothered by stuff, to be able to be a bit more of a minimalist like him. But if you don't know Maria Kondo, she has this phrase. So she's a professional organizer, right? And she's a minimalist, and she teaches people how to clear out their mess or go through and organize their things. And she has this phrase of, but does it spark joy? So Wes adopted this phrase when we started the epic challenge of cleaning up our garage. And he would ask me and hold up like a soft toy of mine that's in my box from when I was a child. And he'd be like, does this spark joy? And I heard that phrase so many times. And let me tell you, it did not help me separate with my stuff at all. So this week, we're going to talk about something that's so common in our culture. In fact, it's so common that a lot of the times we don't even think of it as a sin anymore. It's so common that in the movie Wall Street, there was this guy, and he says in it, this line, Michael Douglas, he's giving a speech, and in it he says that this thing is actually good. And this thing is greed, and he says greed is good. So today we're going to look at greed and see, is it actually deadly or not? If we look at the definition of greed, this is what it has to say. It's an intense desire to accumulate large amounts of something, such as food or possessions or finance. It's when you try to acquire more than you need and try and hold on to something more than your fair share. It can even be the way that we view our possessions, our finance, or our time. If you think about it, very few of us would actually admit that, hey, I have a greed problem, right? Like, it's easier for us to say, man, I struggle with my anger, or I struggle with alcohol, or I struggle with being able to forgive people. But hardly any of us actually say, hey, I really struggle with greed. And that's the thing about greed. This is why it's actually so deadly. Wouldn't it be so interesting if we were to do an audit right now on every single person watching, and we did an audit to see where greed was at in our lives on a scale of 1 to 10, and we looked at the way we spent our time and our money and the way we viewed our possessions? What would it reveal about the greed level in your life? You know, we can all often fall into this pit of greed, no matter how much we have, whether we have heaps or we have hardly anything. Greed is so sneaky like that. And when I think of greed, I think of this character called Scrooge McDuck. He's from my childhood, and he had so much money, and there was pictures of him just making like snow angels or gold coin angels in his pile of money. He was such a Scroogey guy that he never gave to his nephew, Donald Duck. And when I think of Scrooge, I think of him, but greed, when I think of greed, I think of him. But really, it's not just the people who have loads and these piles of money. Greed is actually something that affects all of us, even the penniless. But there's another character that I think epitomizes what greed is. He's from a movie, Lord of the Rings, and his name is Gollum. Now, Gollum was just this ordinary riverfolk guy. He was an ordinary guy who got so greedy with this wanting of this ring, that when he got the ring, he was so greedy that he ended up killing his own cousin for it. When greed took over this guy Gollum, it really disfigured him. It changed how he looked. He became isolated. He became this stretched creature who was disfigured, and he lost all of who he used to be, and he was consumed by greed. If you know the movie Lord of the Rings, then you know he's famous for saying, mine, my precious, me wants it, me needs it. He just held on to everything. And when we look at Gollum, we can think, well, hey, I look nothing like him, so it's fine. Greed hasn't got me like that. But the thing is, greed can get us the same. It can also cause us to be isolated and stretched from who we were and disfigured from the person that God's actually created us to be. Greed can be this kind of sickness, right? It's tricky like that. And a lot of the times when we think of greed, you don't even notice it because greed can actually be wearing so many masks. It disguises itself in things like saying so many excuses like, well, I have all of these things and I have these possessions because I'm being resourceful and maybe one day I might need them. Or it says things like, well, I'm holding on to all this money and I'm saving everything because one day I might need it for something for me. Greed makes us realize that life is all about me and mine and what I can get for myself, and it's not others focused at all. Greed seems so great, and it can give us all of these promises of, hey, at least I'll have security and I'll have enough and I have all these things. But actually, greed also gives us stress. It gives us worry and causes us to be anxious about our things. And what if someone asks for some of it from us? And how are we going to protect everything we have? And greed ends up robbing us. So, what does Jesus have to say about greed? Well, we can see what Jesus had to say about greed in Luke 12, verse 15. And basically, what was happening here was Jesus was speaking to this crowd of people, and he was teaching them and telling them different things. And then this guy, out of nowhere, just like puts his hand up and he says, "Hey, Jesus, can you get my brother to give me half of his money, half of our inheritance?" And if you think about it, that's like a really random question for that guy to even ask Jesus. Like, what's it to do with him? But I think maybe he thought, hey, Jesus helps lots of people. He's got a lot of power and persuasion. May as well ask, and maybe he's going to help me out. But Jesus doesn't demand his brother to give him half of the money. In fact, he does something completely different. And he uses that moment to teach this guy, and not only teach him, but all those listening. And he gives him some fatherly advice that we can read in Luke chapter 12, verse 15. And this is what he says. And Jesus responds to him, and he said to them, "Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." What I believe Jesus was trying to say here is for us to watch out, but not just watch out our life, but watch out on our heart. And why? Because our heart can be tricked, it can be deceived, and greed is so conniving. It can take residence in our heart and actually live there for a long time undetected. The unguarded heart is highly susceptible to this disease of greed that we're speaking about. It's difficult to self-diagnose, and it's easy to point out in someone else, but greed can actually take up residence in our own heart if it's left unguarded. The reason that I think Jesus said to that crowd to watch out and be on their guard against greed is because I think he knew that life was so much more than what we possessed and what we owned, how much money we had in the bank. He knew that there was something so much more meaningful and purposeful to life. You see, I think that greed disfigures us often like it did to Gollum. It changes us and our perspectives to the point that sometimes we'll even do anything, even step on our own friends or family just to get that little bit more ahead. We end up holding so tightly onto our things that we end up letting go and not even holding on to something that really matters, like our relationship with God or our relationship with others. And this is what Jesus was warning them against. So if greed is such a bad thing, then what is it that Jesus was saying? That there's guard their heart because there's something better out there. What was that something better? What is the antidote to greed? Well, I think you know what it is, and so do I, and it's this word generosity. And if we look at the definition of generosity, it says that it's the quality of being kind and giving towards others. It's the opposite of greed. It's others focused, not me focused. It's about seeing what we can give rather than what we can get. As a Jesus follower, it's about trusting God and knowing that, hey, he's got our back and he's going to provide for us in such ways if only we trust him with everything we have instead of hold on to it so tightly. Someone once said, don't feed the greed. And the best way for us not to feed the greed is to actually make generosity a habit, but more than that, make generosity a lifestyle. The more generous we are, the more it breaks the grip on greed. And this is the kind of lifestyle that Jesus was wanting us to have, the type of life that he's planned for us to have. And when I think of the word generosity, I think of a few people that specifically that pop into mind. And these are the kind of people that just epitomize how generosity looks. They make it a lifestyle. And one of these people is actually my dad. He's such a generous guy, and in fact, he's also such a minimalist that I feel he could put Maria Kondo out of business. One of the ways that he's taught me generosity that stands out in particular is when I was 11 years old. So my dad picked up a hitchhiker, as he often did, but he didn't drop this guy at the next closest destination to where he needed to go. Instead, he brought this hitchhiker home, and the guy had dinner with us. And it didn't end there. Then Dad made up the spare room for him, and he stayed with us 1 night, 2 nights, 3 nights. He ended up staying with us for a few weeks. And this was just a normal kind of thing for my dad to do. And over the years, my parents taught me what generosity looked like. And they taught me that it wasn't just a one-off event that you do. It was actually a lifestyle. And something else they did was one day they gave away our family car. And it was the one and only family car we had. But they gave it to someone who they think needed it more. This is the kind of way that they lived out generosity. They had an open door. They didn't hold on to our things tightly. They used them as resources to help others. This inspired me to want to be generous like this as well. In the book of 2 Corinthians, we can find a guy named Paul, and he was trying to share with the church in Corinth about this very thing of generosity. Now, Paul actually helped plant a lot of churches, and he was teaching a lot of people about Jesus. And what was happening was there was a church in Jerusalem that needed some money. They'd come into hard times, and other churches were giving generously to them to help them be able to continue making a difference in their community. And so Paul wanted to speak to this church in Corinth, and he wanted to encourage them to give generously. And so this is what he says, and we can read it in 2 Corinthians 8, verse 1 to 5. He said, "Now, brothers and sisters, we want you to know about the grace that God has given the Macedonian churches. In the midst of very severe trial, their overflowing joy and their extreme poverty welled up in rich generosity. For I testify that they gave as much as they were able," and get this part, "and even beyond their ability. Entirely on their own, they urgently pleaded with us for the privilege of sharing in this service of the Lord's people. They exceeded our expectations. They gave first of all to the Lord, and then by the will of God to us as well." I think this verse is pretty awesome. It actually shows people giving out of more than what they had, and so joyfully and generously as well. See, what Paul was saying was, guys, I didn't even ask them for their money. In fact, I said, no, don't, it's too much. But they begged Paul and they pleaded with him, and they were like, hey, let us have this privilege and this joy of being able to be so generous, and please take this money to help others in need as well. A mark of generosity is the way that it becomes natural for the person to give. It wasn't a burden for them to give. It was actually a joy for them to give. This wasn't something they had to do. It was something they got to do. It was a privilege. And Paul shared this story with the church in Corinth because he wanted them to be able to give out of the same way. See, there were two ways that they could give. One is to give from a generous heart with joy, and the other is to give out of obligation and begrudgingly. Paul wanted them to give with a generous heart, not because he needed the money, but also because he knew the joy it would give them as well. You see, the people in Macedonia gave to the church in Jerusalem just from the pure joy and willingness of their own heart. They saw this as a generous opportunity to be able to serve God and make a difference in others' lives as well. And this was actually a common practice. This happened a lot at this time. When one church would fall into a bit of hardship financially or struggle in some way, another church or other believers would help lift them up and help financially or give the time or their possessions generously. And if you think about it, that's actually how our church works today, all these years later. It's based on people being generous, like you and I, giving our time, our possessions, and our finances in order to help us be able to be generous to others and keep our community growing and looking after the needs of people. See, generosity it's never been about how much we give, but it's all about the way we give. It's about the heart that we have. And I think that's why Jesus told us to be on watch and stand guard. And I think especially for our heart, because it's about giving with everything you got joyfully. I think the way Paul was encouraging this community to give is the exact same way he would encourage you and I to give today. You see, the way I see it is we have three options when it comes to being generous. And this is what they are. The first is to give in to greed and not be generous at all. The second is to give but only out of obligation and kind of like begrudgingly feeling that you have to. And then the third is to give generously with such joy and freedom. Solomon, an author in the Bible, actually shares about generosity this way, and we can read it from Proverbs 11, verse 24 to 25, and this is what he has to say. Give freely and become more wealthy. Be stingy and lose everything. The generous will prosper. Those who refresh others will themselves be refreshed. It's a bit of a brutal verse, and you can think like, well, be stingy and you're going to lose everything, so what should we give out of fear? But it's not about that at all. I think it's more about the second part here where he says, those who refresh others will be refreshed themselves. It's not like, okay, I'll go and give because I'll get something back. It's more like this. If you think of refreshing like watering something, it's like if we water a tree, over time that tree's going to grow up and it's going to in turn offer us shade and refresh us that way. And I think that's exactly the way generosity that Solomon is speaking about actually looks like. So ask yourself the question, what does it look like for you to refresh others? You know, we know this stuff. This isn't the first talk we've heard about greed. We know that greed can be so deadly and it's something that God doesn't want in our lives at all. And we know that generosity can be so beneficial. But we might know it, but do we actually do something about it? Why not take some time this week and actually ask God, hey, where's my heart at? Is there greed creeping into my life and the way I'm viewing my time, my possessions, or my finances? And if so, please remove it. And otherwise, why don't you ask God this week, hey, what resources do I have that could be used to refresh others if I can be generous with it? One of my favorite TV shows is this TV show at the moment called New Amsterdam. And I don't know if you guys have seen it. Maybe give me a thumbs up in the chat. But basically, there's this main doctor in it. And the question that he always asks is, how can I help? And I love that because that is exactly the question that each of us as Jesus followers need to be asking when it comes to generosity. You know, we can hear that there's a need and we can think, man, that's a shame, that poor person, maybe I'll pray for them. But actually, when you're a generous person and you're living with that generous lifestyle, you actually do something about it. You don't just hear that need, you actually then take that next step and you do something about it. And you can ask, how can I help? It can be that simple and that small. Being generous can look like just responding to somebody in need in any little way. When I think about myself, I know that I want to live a generous life. I know that I don't want my life to be all about me and me focused. I want to live a life that's for others. I want to live a life that sparks joy in others, like Maria Kondo says. A generous life is about simply helping others and using what you have to refresh others and viewing it as a resource to be able to be generous with rather than holding on to it for yourself. When we respond with, how can I help? This is a generous life that Jesus was speaking about, and he knew that it wouldn't just help that person, but being generous would in turn help us to see and experience joy as well. This is the kind of life that Jesus invites you and I into every day. We get a choice to choose between greed and generosity. For myself, I know I've experienced the refreshing of others and the outpouring of generosity from other people time and time again. And it's a game changer. This is what's going to bring real change in our community. The only way we can overcome this deadly greed in our lives is actually by inviting God into our lives and allowing God to help us see that what we have can be used as a blessing for someone else. That what we have is more than enough for just us, and asking Him, hey, help me to be able to refresh others with this. How can I help? God, we're grateful for everything that you have given us, and we're grateful for the way that you have reminded us to be on our guard against greed. We know that it's sneaky and that it will creep in if left unattended. So God, we pray that you help us to be able to be intentional, to guard ourselves against it, that we can replace it with generosity, and that we can be a community that pours out generosity to others, just like the Macedonians did, giving more than what we have, just out of the pure joy of being able to make a difference. So God, we just ask that you help us to be able to evaluate our heart this week and check in where we need you to show us how to refresh others. We're thankful for all you've done for us, and we pray you keep us safe the rest of this weekend as well. Amen.
Here is where I lay it down, every burden, every crown. This is my surrender. This is my surrender. Here is where I lay it down, every lie and every doubt. This is my surrender. And I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to. And I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to. Here is where I lay it down, every burden, every crown. This is my surrender. This is my surrender. Here is where I lay it down, every lie and every doubt. This is my surrender. And I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to. And I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to. Shake up the ground of all my tradition, break down the walls of all my religion. Your way is better. Your way is better. Shake up the ground of all my tradition, break down the walls of all my religion. Your way is better. Your way is better. Shake up the ground of all my tradition, break down the walls of all my religion. Your way is better. Your way is better. Shake up the ground of all my tradition, break down the walls of all my religion. Your way is better. Your way is better. And I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to. And I will make room for you to do whatever you want to. to do whatever you want to. Here is where I lay it down. You are all I'm chasing now. This is my surrender. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this awesome moment where we can come together, watching online here at Gracegate. Thank you for who you are and what you've done for us, and just giving us that peace that we all long for in this time. We love you. Thank you for your grace. In your name, amen.
Hey guys, thanks so much for joining us today on Church Online. We really hope that you have been inspired and challenged by what Zalz has been sharing, and hopefully even uplifted through all the different elements that we've had throughout the program. We know that, greed is something that can be quite difficult, something that we all struggle with, but with the things that Zalz has shared and kind of like the challenge that she's put forth, I'm excited to kind of conquer it, which is quite cool.
So just know that conversations don't end here. Let's meet together after the program. We have our regular catch-up chats for after the program happening after this.
Yes.
I believe there will be some details handed out soon.
Yes. Yeah, so the details won't be handed out because we're online.
Oh, just kidding.
But they'll come on the chat, then you'll be able to click on a link or click on the little thing that will take you straight to one of those Zoom chats. And we're excited to actually have those conversations with you and chat about kind of what we've talked about or what we've explored today. Now, we do have some announcements. What are some of our announcements?
Yes, we do. So, first announcement is our life groups are continuing, I believe. I'm just double checking.
Yes.
Through our holidays coming up.
Yes.
And
So that's young adults, that's men's and women's life groups still happening, still meeting online, and still having some great conversations and exploring some things that you guys know. For the young adults, we've been actually going through the Chosen series.
So
amazing
I almost
TV
cried
show.
on Tuesday.
So good.
Seriously.
Highly recommend it if you're not watching it.
We have another announcement for you guys. If you are a mum or you know a mum, then we have a save the date for Friday, the 5th of November. There's more information on our website as well, but this is an evening just to connect with other mums, to be refreshed as women and as parents, and to hear inspiring messages, and just have an evening of connection with other people kind of in the same boat as you.
Oh, that sounds really cool. And like Eliana said, we'd love for you to check out our website. There's going to be more information, if not already more information on there about the whole thing. And so there'll be a little thing that comes on the bottom of the screen where you can check out that. But also, I just want to encourage you guys to actually stay connected. Stay connected.
Yeah.
There are so many different ways that we can stay connected, not just through life groups and stuff, but through our Instagram, through visiting our website and all sorts of stuff. And so I really wanted to encourage you guys to stay connected. And in that kind of line of thinking, if you guys ever want to reach out, if you guys ever want to chat, if you guys are struggling with something, whatever it might be, we'd love for you to contact us, whether it is, any one of us. We'd love to sit and chat with you and kind of, help and walk alongside each other and be a community, basically. Other than that, thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you next weekend for another program.
Yeah, we're excited.
Bye.
We dancing,